My name's Mary McCaffrey, and I'm the Executive Director of History Link.
And can you just give the names of your parents, please?
Yeah, Hugh McCaffrey and Margaret McCaffrey. My father was 40, and my mother was 44 when I was born, which is unusual at that time in 1951. And they had met in Alaska. My mother was up there at the end of the war, and my father was on the Sophie Christensen. My dad was a very gregarious guy. His nickname was Mac McCaffrey, and he had tattoos, which at that time most people didn't have. A big tattoo with a heart that said "Mom," and so he was a very interesting guy. So they met in Alaska, and my dad had been made on the Wawona, and he also had piloted Foss tugboats. But his eyesight at the time that after they got married was in the early 50s was not good enough to do that anymore. But there was this really sad little story, which was there were these contact lenses, and they were huge because they were just like developing them. They were like eyeballs like that. There were these contact lenses that he had tried to use. So there was kind of this little pattern of him trying to stay in the job that he did, which was at that point mastering schooners, and said, but he couldn't because of his eyesight. So this is a letter, because of your eyesight, you're no longer qualified for this. For the time that I knew my dad, he was a real estate man. I mean, they came back to Seattle. They came to Seattle, and he became a real estate man. But we'd always take us to look at boats, like to fishing boats, and talk about these different boats and what this boat was and what it did. And he had this sextant, and he would show me how to use it. Although I really don't know how to use it. It's very complicated how to use one, but but it was really a beautiful instrument, I thought. Just little colors and the whole thing. It's really sweet. My parents separated when I was really young, and I never saw my father again until shortly before he died. I saw him one time. He gave the sextant to my cousin, who was a sailor, and I had the trunk that had the logbook in it at my house, which I actually hadn't seen for a long time. So my cousin, he sailed, and he used that, and he learned how to navigate using the sextant. And then my father actually gave it for a while to the Wawona Foundation, but then he took it back, and actually it had been scavenged for parts, which was really bad. And so my cousin went and went all over the country, actually, to different places to replace all the parts that were scavenged. And so that document came with the sextant when we gave it, all the documents of everything that had been replaced here and there. But the sextant was made in Seattle in the 1800s. Okay. And so it was a pretty nice piece. When my cousin died, or my cousin's husband actually died, she sent the sextant back to me. And I had found the logbook in some old papers a while ago, and when I opened it up, it was the poignant thing was that there's a part in that logbook that talks about my father's birthday and how the crew of the ship all got together and they had a party. And his birthday is on the same day as my husband's birthday. So we were reading that, and it's like, oh my God, that was so strange, to read that. But that book is pretty musty. It's just, Fred said they just got it restored, so it's great.
It's just back in the case now.
So I had that, and because all I had were the family stories. I really didn't have any proofs of anything. But that was I knew that he'd been on the Wawona. You know, the story was that he was first mate. I think he was first mate because on here, on his death certificate, it says first mate. And Fred at the Nordic Heritage Museum writes for History Link. And I was thinking about giving the, you know, I thought, well, this sexton made in Seattle, it's nice, I should give it to a museum. And he said, well, wait a minute. Why'd you give it to us? And I said, really? Would you want it? And he said, yeah, we'd really like it. And I said, oh, that's great. You know, I have a logbook that goes with it that, you know, documents the time that he was on the Sophie Christensen. And he said, God, that's great. I like them both. So that's how I ended up giving it to the Nordic Museum.
And you had a chance to see it on display?
Yeah, that was really great. I went to the, you know, one of the thousands of openings, and I dragged everybody, you know, like up there to see it, yeah. So it was really sweet to see it there, and I really appreciated it. It's great. My cousin who had sent all this to me, you know, I told her I was doing that, and then I brought her with me to one of the opening events, and she got a chance to go and see it, and she was really pleased about what had happened to it. So yeah, and it's great because it's great that it's got a home, you know, that it's found to be valuable in terms of telling the history of the place that we live. And even though I'm not Nordic, I'm Irish, but then, you know, the Vikings were all over there, so I probably have a bit in my blood. I really like the Nordic Museum. I think it's a wonderful place, and I love the new museum. It's beautiful. So I'm delighted. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.